now Citrus County's top political podcast.
At some point you look around, and you're the only one.
It's pretty good.
And just like that, the perspective shifts.
Paging Bobby Winsler to the microphone. On in 3, 2.
Welcome in, coming to you from the Concurrent Media Network in the heart of Citrus County. However you're making us part of your day, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, even through the Concurrent website, we are sure glad you're joining us. Another show today is going to be brought to you by you. If you requested a print copy of the Concurrent, it should have shown up at your house sometime yesterday, maybe not in the morning, but thank you so much for those requests. We will keep them coming monthly on the 17th. So today's show, once again, like last week, brought to you by you. It's a commission meeting day to day, also a Crystal River City Council meeting last night. But despite a ton of projects in the works, from the new animal shelter to the Ford Island Trail bike path, and planning for the parkway coming through, you name it, there's a ton out there, there hasn't been much news generated. This may be because right now it's difficult to focus on local topics when there's so much else happening in the world, from COVID to Afghanistan, back to school. You even have a statewide election starting to heat up here in Florida as the spotlight intensifies on Governor Ron DeSantis. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mentioned in the last show that staying informed is hard emotionally. And I do think the public is experiencing a bit of news fatigue right now. That's going to be hard to break out of. But you come here to think, and you come here to be entertained. So I'm going to do my best to deliver both to you today. Let's start with this. Partisan blindness is a real concept. Partisan blindness. This means when our own biases prevent us from seeing certain information. This has been called living in the echo chamber. It's been called confirmation bias. And we probably know it as the feeling we get when we just can't quite understand how someone could possibly think what they do. 100 years ago in the 1920s, doesn't that sound weird? 100 years ago in the 1920s, after decades of what was called yellow journalism, or sensationalized stories to the point of falsehoods, since yellow journalism was perpetuated by two tycoon publishers, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. There was an academic that arose from this time in the 1920s named Walter Lippmann, who introduced the concept of objectivity in the news. It's important to note that Walter Lippmann never claimed that journalists themselves would be objective. He recognized that people would always have biases, and these biases would always inevitably be known to the public. Lippmann said objectivity isn't a character trait, it's a process. He felt you could briefly set aside biases in pursuit of objectivity long enough to do your job of reporting on a story, but that objectivity itself is not a default natural state for us. Lippmann felt the public would give reporters a pass on their personal biases if the public could trust the process of objectivity. It isn't belief in the objectivity of the reporter themselves, but trust in the reporter's ability to participate in the objectivity's process. Pulitzer picked up on this idea as a business decision rather than a calling toward doing the best to keep the public informed free of persuasion. He felt he could sell more papers if he covered content in a way that would appeal to all sides. And he did find success with it. And the Lippmann standard of objectivity became the industry norm. This is why we associate Pulitzer's name with the highest degree of reporting Though Hearst does have an award named after him too, it's just not as popular as the Pulitzer Prize. I had written about this in one of the Concurrent's first columns. It had to be in February or early March, and I called it the rabbit or the duck, referring to the pictures where it's displayed as two things depending on what your perspective of the picture is, such as a rabbit or a duck. That's what happened when a Chronicle reporter, Mike Bates, who I think is wonderfully talented, that's what happened when Mike Bates and I looked at the commission meeting agenda for today. He saw a rabbit, I saw a duck. He wrote several bullet points, from the dog park to be discussed to Nature Coast EMS budgeting issue, and even some requested extra equipment for Labor Day by CCSO for Marine Patrol. But none of it included the United Way's CARES Act presentation that's also happening today. If you read Sunday's column, you know that was the main subject. That's what I saw when I looked at the agenda, despite us coming to two separate conclusions about what was important. In truth, it's all important, so there isn't a right or a wrong way of reading the agenda. There's a lingering feeling, though, that sometimes with the Chronicle, it's as much about what isn't published as it is about what does make it to the pages. Let's be clear. I think the most probable explanation for why Mike Bates and I came to two separate ideas about what was important on the agenda is because he has been doing this longer and is better at it than I am. But it does feel like there is a chance that the United Way was intentionally excluded because the report is not going to go well. And the Chronicle doesn't want to call attention to something that will end up reflecting negatively on the United Way, which, if you read Sunday's column, you'll know that even though I think the report isn't going to go well to show what the program established with the CARES Act funds, the program itself was probably ineffectual. I don't think that was the fault of the United Way, so no one's actually attacking the United Way. So are both of us being objective? It's hard to say if we're participating in the process. But there are other examples of these omissions in reporting that need to be looked at. There was a report this week about the jobless numbers in citrus, and the raw data itself wasn't altogether bad. We're still tied for the fifth highest unemployment of the 67 counties in the state, but the unemployment rate locally fell 0.7% from 7.2 down to 6.5% over the last month, and is at least trending in the right direction. But it's not what's in the report, just like it's not what's in Mike Bates' agenda reading. It's what's not in it. The story quoted Mr. Rusty Skinner, who is CEO of Career Source for a Tri-County area, including citrus, and he's a regular contributor on stories like this. Mr. Skinner had every opportunity to tout a $1,000 sign-on bonus program that the chamber had suggested, the county had approved, and that Career Source is administering to try to get people back to work. I was against the program because I thought it did too much harm to existing employee morale. It was a classic example of what President Reagan called the 7 scariest words, quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Instead of touting the program as a success with these improved numbers as evidence, Mr. Skinner, whose organization oversaw the distribution of the sign-on bonus, talked about an upcoming job fair. The Chamber of Commerce was asked by the Commission to make a presentation about their CARES Act funds at the same time as United Way, about an hour from now at the Commission meeting, but they don't appear on the schedule for this week, and the sign-on program is going to likely be part of that report as well. So again, it's not what's in these stories that shows objectivity. It's what's not in them. And I don't know if that's personal reporter bias coming through, or if it's just us participating in the process of seeking objectivity differently. To wrap up this topic, I'll clarify one thing, though. I don't think there was any impropriety, corruption, or otherwise wrongdoing on either of these programs in handling the funds. I think they were put into impossibly hard situations by the commission and tried to help. But there is plenty we can learn from the results of these programs if we set aside our biases briefly and participate in the process of objectivity. Getting to topic 2, but first, who am I kidding? Today's show is once again brought to you by you. The Concurrent just delivered the print editions. I hope you enjoy. Sign up on our website if you'd like to be included in that delivery route, and enjoy this interlude before a brief topic 2. Over the last several weeks, mainly 2 weeks ago, I wrote extensively about leadership and how sometimes the commissioners will have to go against the most vocal public opinions to do their jobs well. The example I used in the columns and during last week's episode was with the Central Ridge Park, saying that it's time Commissioner Ruthie Schleybaugh just makes a decision and fights for it against some of her colleagues who would rather see it as a recreational football field in Holder than park renovations in Beverly Hills. The commission is set to vote today on a dog park for Citrus Springs, one that will cost $68,000, or about the same as each project Commissioner Schleybaugh presented to the commission for the Central Ridge Park. And I imagine the commission is unanimously going to approve this dog park project, though there is going to be some pushback. The dog park is going to be funded through impact fees specifically collected for parks, which is how Commissioner Schleybaugh wants Central Ridge to be funded, while Commissioners Scott Carnahan and Ron Kitchen are pressing for an additional fee to be imposed on Beverly Hills residents for the renovations. I want to pause here for a second to address the Chronicle comment section on the story, because a lot of people are commenting that they could be using the money to pave roads, that they could be using the money for the new animal shelter, or that we could just be saving the money so that taxes don't necessarily go up. And that's just, I understand the sentiment, but it's a bit of a misunderstanding of where the money is coming from. Impact fees are collected through new construction, and it's split up into 8 different subcategories. You can check the Concurrent Facebook for what these are and how much go into each. And there is one specifically designated for parks, just like there's one designated for transportation and one designated for public buildings. You can't use park collected fees for roads, which would be transportation, nor can you use it for things like the shelter, which would be public buildings, nor does this come out of the general fund, which is where our taxes revenues could go up. Although they did just increase the impact fees in March, with Commissioner Carnahan being the only dissenting vote on that. So you can't use these fees for what people are thinking are, but we could renovate Central Ridge Park prior to launching into a new park with the dog park. So I'm with Commissioner Schleybaugh on this one. I don't think Beverly Hills should have to come out of pocket for the Central Ridge Park that the full county is going to use, particularly if pickleball courts that will attract residents from nearby Citrus Hills are installed. But she needs to make a decision on what this is going to be. And this all, if you can believe it, it's not the topic of the segment. I only bring it up because Commissioner Schleybaugh hosted a town hall, and the public overwhelmingly told her that they wanted the pool back, which isn't really an option being considered. Meaning, to get anything done, she'll have to go against the most vocal voices of public opinion. That's where we get to our topic of this segment, which is the stormwater runoff fee. I am 100% in favor of this fee being passed by the commission, and 100% against the way it was done. It reminds me a lot of the debt ceiling debate that gets really public at the federal level about once every 3 or 4 years. It's always a last-second decision, just long enough for a bunch of congressmen and women to make speeches about how awful it is that we've maxed out the national credit card, and then vote to raise it. But it has to happen so the country doesn't default. As screenwriter Aaron Sorkin puts it in The West Wing, as two characters talk about the issue, one explains what would happen if the credit ceiling vote didn't pass. Quote, "It would be the immediate collapse of the U.S. economy, followed by Japan sinking into the sea, followed by a global depression, the likes of which no mortal can imagine, followed by week 2. So, this debt ceiling thing is routine or the end of the world?" another character asks him. "Both," he responds. And that's where we're at with the stormwater vote. The commission has budgeted this year in a way to save a little less than $1 million to help keep the millage rate down, but has done so through adding this stormwater runoff fee that will collect about the same amount of money, a little less than $1 million. It's a fairer way to do it, they'll say when asked. And maybe it is. Maybe. But it's hard to imagine it's not somewhat politically motivated for a commission that likes to tout low tax rates to have found any way possible to suppress the millage rate. That being said, we absolutely need this to pass. What we're already seeing in Homosassa is how easily runoff can find its way into our waterways if it's not proactively taking measures to keep it contained, if the county isn't. So after the notices of the fee raised were mailed and published in the paper, however, there was a bit, and a bit is underselling it, there was a huge public outcry against the measure. Coincidentally, the commissioner who was most vocal against the commission doing it this way was Ruthie, who appeared to understand that this blowback would happen and predicted the response, saying it would be tough to pass in a later meeting, that later meeting being today, with so much opposition when the notices are mailed, which is in fact exactly what's happening. In fact, at least two separate Facebook groups two separate Facebook posts in various groups received over 150 comments about the notices. That's 300 comments from the public total. That's a lot for an issue like this. There likely will be people who show up at the meeting to speak against the fee raise, which again, absolutely has to happen. So this is a learning experience for the commissioners and for the public. The public needs to let the commissioners know this type of budgeting practice, which is creative at best, underhanded at worst, is unacceptable in the future. And the commission needs to learn that it can listen to the concerns of the public, who will be overwhelmingly against this measure that absolutely needs to pass, and still make a decision to vote in a way that they know is right. Without this vote, the county becomes horribly polluted, followed by contaminated drinking water, followed by Homosassa sinking into the sea, followed by week 2. But with it comes an opportunity to do better and become more comfortable with making a decision against some of the most vocal public that needs to happen in the Central Ridge Park, just like Commissioner Schleybaugh needs to do. That's all from the Bobby Winsler Show. Follow the Concurrent on social media for the latest updates, and we'll be back next Tuesday at noon. If you want to join this conversation, find us on social at the Concurrent Facebook, Twitter, or go to the Concurrent website, mobile app, post on our discussion boards. Today's show was sponsored by you.